Hi, I'm Adam Summer. You're listening to the Yerushalmi Talk podcast with the support of the Yeshivat Devar Yerushalayim in Har Nof, Jerusalem. This is Sheviis, chapter 8, Halacha 8, and this is going to finish up the 8th chapter. 9th chapter, we're going to be getting into more about Beur and Sefachim. So the Mishnah now is going to talk about prohibited uses of Sheviis funds and what happens when somebody uses these Sheviis funds in an unlawful way, or Sheviis produce in an unlawful way. What do you do with it? How's it going to work? So the Mishnah says one may not purchase slaves, land, or non-kosher animals with Sheviis funds. And, we learned over there that you're not allowed to use Sheviis money to pay off a debt. Why is that? Because we know from the Torah, the pasuk in the Torah is talking about for eating. And it's also going to be for other human needs like drinking. And so the idea is that if you're putting the Sheviis funds into something that you can't eat or you can't use, like, for instance, you can't eat a non-kosher animal. So if you put your Sheviis funds into a non-kosher animal, you can't eat it. So what are you going to do with it? Also, you can't buy land with it. What are you going to do with Sheviis money if somebody went and bought land? The land would theoretically have Sheviis sanctity, but it can't have Sheviis sanctity because it doesn't transfer. So it's a misuse of it. And, again, it's, having to do with human needs, and you having labor or land or non-kosher animals with Sheviis funds is not something that you can eat and not something that you can use for, your needs. So it's a big problem if you go and you misappropriate the money. And so the Mishnah says if he did purchase them, he must eat added food as Sheviis in an amount corresponding to the Sheviis funds that he spent. So this, by the way, is going to be a hekesh where it's going to apply to any misappropriation like paying off debt. That's also going to be included. So what do we mean by where it says that if he did purchase them, something that's inappropriate, he must eat added food as Sheviis in an amount corresponding to the Sheviis funds he spent. How does that work? Basically, says the Mara Fulda, is that he has to buy or set aside an amount of non-Sheviis produce equal in value to the funds he spent and eat it subject to the laws of Sheviis. So basically, he has to now take and endow this food with Sheviis sanctity by transferring the sanctity from the money that he spent on it to the food. And the idea is that, according to the Ritva, the Mishnah simply means that as a penalty for improperly spending the Sheviis funds, he must treat the food which does not possess Sheviis sanctity as if it had this sanctity. And the question is going to come up about what happens when sanctity gets transferred to another object, even through a verbal deconsecration, and what's going to happen where you have misapplications of Sheviis produce coming up in the Gemara. So the Mishnah is going to continue, and it's going to say, one may not bring the bird pair offerings of Zavin, Zavos, or a woman who has just given birth from Sheviis funds. So you can't bring, so in the case of the woman who just gave birth, this is referring to a woman who's very poor, because the way it works is that if she was richer, she would bring a bird and a chatas. A bird is the chatas and a lamb is the olah. And if she's poor, she just brings the bird pair. So because this is talking about the bird pair, this is talking about a poor woman. The Mishnah is referring to a poor woman. So the Zavos, these are going to be women who experience a discharge at a non-normal time. And then it's going to be like 3 consecutive days, and then she has to go to the mikvah. And after that, she goes and she brings a bird pair. And this, by the way, is in Vayikra. It's in chapter 15. And actually, all of these are in Vayikra. The Zav, this is going to be somebody who has something similar to gonorrhea, or it's gonorrhea, and it's going to be 7 consecutive clean days without this emission, and then they have to go into spring water, special spring water, and after that he has to bring a bird pair offering. So this is talking about the pair of birds, which is going to be either pigeons or doves, and that's going to be offered either as the chatas or as the olah. And by the way, in each of these cases, these are the 3 cases where they bring a pair. The other, there are not other cases where they bring a pair of offerings. These are the 3 cases where they bring a pair of the bird offerings. So the Mishnah for this kind of tuma. So the Mishnah is going to teach about. So the Mishnah says if he did bring them, then he must eat added food as Sheviis in an amount corresponding to the Sheviis funds he spent. So the idea is that from this, it's clear that the bird, which is supposed to be the olah offering, cannot be brought with Sheviis money. And the idea is because the bird has to be completely burned on the altar. Okay, so in these bird offerings, they have to be completely burned with nothing left over. And this Mishnah is teaching, because it's talking about a pair, that even the chatas can't be purchased with the funds, because this is going to be completely eaten by the Goan. And effectively, the idea is that you're not going to get any use out of eating it. And the one is totally burned on the altar, so that's totally like wasting. And in the other case, you're not getting any use. The blood is put on the altar, and then the Kohanim eat it. And the Pnei Moshe is going to explain this as that there's a rule that an obligatory offering may be purchased only with non-sacred money, and the idea is that the sanctity associated with Sheviis produce renders its funds sacred. This is the Pnei Moshe, and therefore unusable for the purchase of obligatory offerings. And the idea is that he has to be penalized for this unlawful use of Sheviis funds. And the idea is that the sanctity of the Sheviis funds is transferred to the birds when they're sold. And even though the sale is unlawful, since theoretically the birds could be eaten on Sheviis, then once the birds are offered, they can't be redeemed anymore, and because they have to be eaten and burned. So the rabbis are requiring the buyer to eat non-Sheviis food as Sheviis solely as a penalty. And the Mishnah is going to continue, and the Mishnah is teaching a prohibited use of Sheviis oil and the consequences of illegally using it in this way. And it says that one may not smear utensils with Sheviis oil, and if he did smear them, he must eat added food as Sheviis in an amount corresponding to the oil he smeared. So I want to explain about smearing the utensils of the Sheviis oil, and I want to talk about that for a second. So where would you be putting oil onto Sheviis oil or any oil onto a utensil? And the issue about that is, well, if you have iron pans and this is going to be worldwide. I mean, even in China, where they have these iron woks, which have been used for thousands of years, or since they've had iron working, the idea is that you have to season them. You have to rub them down with oil, and you have to heat them up at a high temperature. It creates a non-stick polymer that keeps the iron pan from rusting. And if you don't treat it this way, the pan will rust. This is all in a day before they had stainless steel. Stainless steel is done where they take the iron, they make it into steel, and they use nickel. And they use nickel in the where they heat it up in a very high temperature to make it non-stick. But non-stick is only about 130 years old. It was invented sometime in the 1800s, where they figured this out. And in an earlier time, if you take a pan that you hammer out with iron, and you're cooking on it, and you're washing it, you're cleaning it, and you didn't coat it with oil and treat it with this high temperature treatment after it, it's just going to rust, and you're not going to be able to use it. So the smearing the utensil with the oil is a necessary thing to preserve it, so you can use it for years and years and years. Now, the idea is that what happens if you're smearing this oil all over your pot and pan? What's going to happen? Well, when you heat it up, it creates this polymer, and it creates this like non-stick coating on it. But now you have Sheviis, and so now you would have a case where your pan would be subject to Beur because it's got this coating all over it. And they're saying that if you did smear this oil onto the utensils, you have to eat an added food as Sheviis in an amount corresponding to the oil that he smeared, so that he's basically going to be penalized for unlawfully using the Sheviis product. And part of the issue is that the oil also is going to no longer exist because it's been turned into this non-polymer glaze. And the person has to eat non-Sheviis food subject to the laws of Sheviis as a penalty. But part of the issue is that you have something that doesn't quite exist in the same way anymore. So you can't just take the oil off this pan and use it. So that's why they're saying that you have to take this other food and treat it as Sheviis and do that. And you have to take your money and purchase it. Now, the Mishnah is going to talk about a related disagreement. And it says that a hide which was smeared with Sheviis oil, Rabbi Lazer says it must be burned. And the sages say he must eat the added food as Sheviis in an amount corresponding to the oil smeared. This, by the way, is going to be complicated. So there's a lot of Rishonim who are saying that actually Rabbi Lazer would actually say about these utensils smeared with Sheviis oil that they have to be destroyed. So they would say that would be the opinion of Rabbi Lazer over there. Now, let's say you have a hide, and let's say you rubbed it with Sheviis oil. What's going to happen? Well, the Sheviis oil is going to seep into this hide. And now, when the time of Beur comes, you can't get the oil out of it, but the oil is still there. And so the idea is that you have to burn it. And Rabbi Lazer is holding that the transgression must be punished by having the hide burned. And the penalty, this is also going to come up to another idea about Beur as well. And by the way, the Rambam is going to hold this opinion that with Beur, it's not enough just to take the Beur product and put it outside. That there's a Maloket Tanayim that Beur actually has to be destroyed. So Rabbi Lazer is going to be taking the strict view as well and saying that it's not enough just put outside and make it hefker, you actually have to destroy it. The Rambam is going to hold that opinion as well. And the issue here is that because the because that you can't get the Sheviis oil out of this hide, it's going to be a thing where you once the Beur comes, you have to destroy it. That's going to be the opinion of Rabbi Lazer. The sages say no, it's not the same case, and it's going to be where it's going to be just like the utensils, and they're going to say that the penalty should be just like the utensils. In other words, you go and you buy non-Sheviis food and you ascribe to it Sheviis sanctity and you treat it that way. So the Tana is going to dispute the account of this disagreement. This, by the way, this disagreement, you could spend years trying to look at the vagaries because there are so many ways to interpret this. So the Mishnah says that they said before Rabbi Akiva, Rabbi Lazer had said that a hide that was smeared with Sheviis oil must be burned. And Rabbi Akiva said to them, "Be silent. I will not tell you what Rabbi Lazer actually said regarding this." Now, there's a lot of things going on here. Is it a case where Rabbi Lazer's opinion was actually going to be more lenient than the sages? Or is it going to be a case where the real opinion of Rabbi Lazer's opinion was actually going to be more strict than the sages? Is it going to be a case where the people who are coming and saying this opinion of Rabbi Lazer got the opinion wrong, and then Rabbi Akiva is not willing to say what is the correct opinion of what Rabbi Lazer said because they don't want he doesn't want to portray his teacher in a bad light? Or is it going to be a case where perhaps they don't want to give Rabbi Lazer's true opinion because he was excommunicated? He was excommunicated for going against the opinion of the rabbis. There's a lot here that's going on, and in trying to look at Rabbi Akiva's motivations, that's going to be one thing, and we can think of many possibilities on why he's not giving the exact reason. And then we could look at what really was Rabbi Lazer's opinion. Was it more lenient? Was it more strict? Is it not being put out there because of an excommunication issue? Or is this coming where they don't want to put out the halacha by Rabbi Lazer because it's going to be where it might be a lot more extreme than the sage's opinion, or it might be a lot more lenient than the sage's opinion. And keep in mind that it could also be that Rabbi Akiva just doesn't want to give Rabbi Lazer's true opinion because Rabbi Lazer was excommunicated at a certain point because of the opposition to the majority of the sages. So there's a similar incident, basically the same case is going to come up. It says another incident occurred in which they said before him, Rabbi Lazer had said that one who eats the bread of a Kuthian is comparable to one who eats pig meat. And Rabbi Akiva said to them, "Be silent, I will not tell you what Rabbi Lazer really said regarding this." So clearly Rabbi Akiva had personally heard from Rabbi Lazer that he was not as stringent as this. And to the contrary, it could be that he was more lenient with regards to Kuthian bread. There's other people who are going to interpret it that Rabbi Akiva is saying that Rabbi Lazer was more stringent than what had even been reported. So this could also be, a motivation. In other words, these students are coming to Rabbi Akiva saying, "Oh, this is what Rabbi Lazer said," and he could be saying, "Be quiet," because actually his real opinion was actually more stringent than that. Or it could be that he's actually going to be more lenient than even the sages. So very, very hard to gauge on exactly the right way this thing is working. And even from the Gemaras, it's going to be very hard to come up with exactly how this is working. So having discussed the penalties that the sages said for not using Sheviis produce in the right way, the Mishnah is now going to teach a case where there was a penalty that was not enacted. So the Gemara says, or the Mishnah says, if a bathhouse was heated with either chopped straw or whole straw of Sheviis. Now, we know that you're not allowed to destroy Sheviis produce, and what could you use straw for? Well, you can feed it to your animals. So if they're taking something that could be fed to an animal, you're not allowed to waste it, and this would be considered to be wasting. Now, what are you heating up in a bathhouse? There's two things. Either you're heating up the water or you're heating up a sauna. Now, when you're heating up a sauna, that's going to be where you're heating up the air. So you heat up the material, the air gets very hot, and you pour some water onto some stones, but really it's going to be the air that you're heating. And in a bathhouse, you could also be taking the straw and heating up a fire that's going to be heating up the water. Now, if you're going into the water, you're getting the benefit from the water. And if you're going into the sauna with the air, you're going to be getting the benefit directly from the air. So in other words, the heat from the fire directly went to heat the air, and that's what you're using. So it's a violation no matter what you do. The question is, what are you going to be doing with it? How's it going to work? Okay? And the Mishnah says that one is permitted to bathe in it, but if he's a respected person, this basically means if he's a Torah scholar or learned, the Mishnah says that he should not bathe in it. And if a person is respected like a Torah scholar, not only should he be stricter with himself than the law actually requires, but other people are going to emulate him. And since such a person is not bathing in the water, they're going to see that you can't, it must be that you can't use the Sheviis produce in such a wasteful way. And that's going to be the idea. Now, the Rambam about this in his commentary in Hilchos Shemitah 520 is going to say that the Mishnah is going to prohibit a respected person from bathing out of concern that the bath attendants might burn herbs of Sheviis, which are aromatic, in order to give the bath a good fragrance. And you're not allowed to burn Sheviis produce for an aroma because the benefit comes only after the product has been destroyed. In other words, when you're burning the aroma, you're not using the aroma immediately. First you destroy it and then the aroma comes out. So when it's talking about respected individual, this does not only refer to somebody who is respected for his Torah knowledge, but also people for other reasons like wealth and power. And the attendants might come and be incentivized to go and burn other Sheviis things to try to make this important person happy. So it might be like putting a stumbling block in front of a blind person. In other words, we see they're already burning the Sheviis hay. Well, to make this bathhouse experience nice, they might want to create incense. So maybe they'll take some rosemary, which does have Sheviis sanctity, and burn it. And then what will happen? Well, you've destroyed Sheviis produce. So the Gemara is going to talk about, the Mishnah is talking about where you can't buy slaves with Sheviis funds. And Rabbi Yossi says that this teaches that it is forbidden to acquire for oneself a wife using Sheviis funds. In other words, when you go and you do kiddushin, right, you have to go and you have to give her something of value. Are you going to be allowed to give Sheviis funds, Sheviis coins to the woman? And is that going to count as something that's going to let you acquire her? And the Gemara is going to continue. So it says that this teaches that it is forbidden to acquire oneself a wife using Sheviis funds. For if it is not so, what difference is there between one who acquires a wife and one who acquires a maidservant? In other words, since Sheviis funds can only be expended for eating and other forms of human consumption like drinking, the only justification to permit someone to use these funds for kiddushin is that the wife would cook and prepare food for him. But that's actually not enough, because a wife is also supposed to do other things like make a bed. And one of the requirements of the Jewish woman is to make the bed of the husband. That's or to do the laundry of the husband. That's one of the expected roles in Kiddushin. So if it says over here in the Mishnah that you're not allowed to hire a maidservant, well, the idea is that since a wife doesn't just cook the food, but also is, doing the laundry or something like making the bed, then, since that's a different role, you can't use this money to go acquire a wife. And then the Mishnah talked about that you may not smear utensils with oil of Sheviis. And the Brisa discusses the law, and it was taught in the Brisa, oil of Sheviis, one may not use it to strengthen an oven or a stove. So let's say you're taking the oil of Sheviis and you're going to rub it on an oven to harden it. In other words, you get it to a very high temperature and it's going to get put into place and harden. And effectively, it's like finishing it. And the issue is that when you're using this, some of the oil is still going to be absorbed into the oven. It's going to create this like glaze, and you can't use it because now the oven now has like this polymer glaze on it from the oil from treating it with this high heat, and now you can't get that out. You can't get it off. And also it's going to be considered like you've wasted. So the Mishnah is going to continue from this, or the Gemara is going to continue with this Brisa. It says, nor may one smear it on shoes or sandals. So there still are two ways of treating leather. One of the ways that you treat leather is you put on all sorts of rubs like oils and things like that to keep it waterproof and to keep the leather from drying out and from cracking. And the worry is that this oil is going to become absorbed into the shoe. And now you're going to have an issue because now it's like you're benefiting the shoe and you're supposed to be eating it. And, this oil gets absorbed into the shoe. And what do you do with it? Now what happens when Beur comes? So that's going to be a problem. And then the Gemara is going to continue. It's going to say a person may not smear it on his foot while his foot is within the shoe or within the sandal. Again, the issue is going to be that it's going to look like that you're not really doing it for your foot. It's going to be a Maris Ein issue. It's going to look like you're trying to do it to cure and benefit the sandal and to treat the sandal so it doesn't dry out. And the Gemara continues and says, one may smear oil on himself and then roll on a boiled hide. So, and it continues and it says, and he need not be concerned about violating the law. Why is that? Well, you are allowed to roll on a hide. And even if you rubbed it onto yourself to treat your skin, you are allowed to anoint yourself with it. And then, if you happen to move onto another subject and the oil got onto it, you weren't trying to treat the hide. You weren't trying to treat the other thing. It just happened to get onto it. But the main part of you rubbing it on yourself was you're doing the law of you being allowed to anoint yourself with oil. So if basically what this is saying, if some of the oil got onto something else, then it's going to be allowed. And the problem is going to come is when you're trying to use the oil to go treat like this hide, and you're trying to oil this hide or this shoe to give it some sort of treatment so it doesn't dry out or doesn't crack. But over here, he's not doing that. He's putting it on himself. And his intention is to put it on himself. And if it happens to go onto a hide, okay, it happened, but that wasn't the idea. Now, it continues and it says that, and he may not put the oil on a marble tile and then roll on it, but Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel allows it. So, okay, we know that, he may not put the oil onto a hide and then roll on it. And he over here, he may not put it onto a marble tile and then roll on it. And why is that? The Rambam is saying in his Hilchos Shmita 5:7 that the oil will inevitably be absorbed by the hide, and it will appear as if that was what he was trying to do. And it's going to be just like if he smeared the oil on his foot while it was in the shoe. And the Brisa is trying to teach us, says the Rambam, that one may not put oil on a marble tile and then roll on it either, even though the oil is not absorbed by the tile, and most of the oil will be absorbed by the body, but a small amount will not be absorbed and will go to waste. And it basically will come about where you've effectively wasted it. And anyway, people don't normally smear oil on themselves by rolling it on a marble tile. But the idea by Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel is that only a small amount of the oil will go to waste, and his intent of this act is to absorb the oil in his body, and therefore, according to Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel, it is not forbidden to waste. It's not a forbidden waste of Sheviis produce. And the Mishnah now was talking about these issues about Rabbi Akiva, and when he gets informed by these students of Rabbi Lazar's rulings, and we know that one of them is going to be about the hide smeared with Sheviis oil that had to be burned. So the Gemara says, I will not tell you what Rabbi Lazar said regarding this. And the Gemara asks, regarding a hide smeared with Sheviis oil, what did Rabbi Lazar say about it, according to Rabbi Akiva? The Gemara is going to answer. It says, Rabbi Yosei said that the bones of that man who smeared it should be burned. And Rabbi Hiskiah said in the name of Rabbi Acha, Rabbi Lazar really said that it is permitted to smear the hide with Sheviis oil. So let's explain this. Rabbi Yosei is saying that the bones of that man who smeared it should be burned. Okay, and really, Rabbi Lazar did not say that the hide should be burned. Rather, he was saying it as a curse that the person's bones should be burned. And what a powerful curse, because there's a whole big issue, a question. Is somebody whose bones were burned, are they going to be allowed for resurrection of the dead? So what a serious thing. We have in Ezekiel, when they see all the bones coming back for resurrection of the dead, the person who did not have resurrection of the dead was the person who lent ribis. And Ezekiel sees one of the people not being resurrected, and they ask Hashem and the angels, who is this guy? And they said, oh, this is the guy who used to lend money on interest. Well, this is a guy who's purposefully abusing Sheviis oil, abusing the laws of Sheviis, which is a direct obligation. And Rabbi Lazar is basically putting a rabbinic curse on this person. And the Rabbi Akiva, one way to look at it is Rabbi Akiva is feeling that Rabbi Lazar's true opinion was actually going to be too extreme to publicize. And there's going to be other Amorim who are going to disagree with that and say that either his opinion was too stringent or too lenient. And according to Rabbi Yosei, he's saying that the true opinion of Rabbi Lazar is actually going to be too stringent, because he's holding that it's not enough to just penalize a person who smeared it to go and find food and buy food with equal value, and then to put to put it where they have to treat this food with Sheviis sanctity. That's very extreme. And likewise, he's saying that actually the true opinion, Rabbi Yossi is saying the true opinion of Rabbi Lazar is actually more stringent, because he's saying that even to burn the hide is not enough. That he actually has to be given this rabbinical curse, which is going to be that his bones have to be burned. Now, Rabbi Hiskiah is saying that in the name of Rabbi Acha, Rabbi Lazar really said that it is permitted to smear the hide with Sheviis oil. So the question is, well, what does that mean? And according to Rabbi Hiskiah, Rabbi Akiva is saying that Rabbi Lazar's true opinion was actually going to be too lenient, because he's saying that it was permitted to smear the oil on the hide in the first place. And he's saying that he's permitted to smear it on there, but he's just going to get a rabbinical curse. And actually, that's going to be more lenient, they're saying. And Rabbi Lazar is going to be saying that, if someone smears the oil onto the hide, that, the Rabbi Lazar is going to be where, a question about human benefit and human need. And then the question is, what about, this curse? And so maybe, he could be saying that you're allowed to do this. You don't need to go burn it, and just your bones will be burned. That's another way to look at it and read it, and that's the reading of the Ridvaz on it. So there's a disagreement between the Yerushalmi and the Bavli on what Rabbi Yossi is exactly saying on this, and there's going to be another exchange about the bread of the Kuthian, and the Mishnah is relating this similar exchange, and another incident occurs in which they said before him, Rabbi Lazar said, it says one who eats the bread of a Kuthian is comparable to one who eats pig meat. Now the Gemara is going to understand that the bread of a Kuthian is treated with severity because Kuthians were suspected of not taking tithes from items that they sold to others. And so Rabbi Yossi is saying about this, he's saying that this teaches that it is forbidden to marry the daughter of an Amma Aretz. Well, why would that be? Because the Amma Aretz has trained the child not to grow, or not to go and separate tithes. And if they went and married somebody who's religious, the daughter is going to see somebody taking tithes. And what's going to happen is that this Amma Aretz daughter is going to go and transgress the law by feeding untithed food. And eating untithed food is very serious. And she doesn't know how to prepare the food right. She doesn't know how to do it right. And effectively, eating Kuthian bread is going to be like eating, pig meat. So basically, it's following that we should not marry such a woman, an Amma Aretz woman, so that we don't eat this questionable food. And by the way, questionable food. So she might, have the food in a case where it's even subject to demai. And if somebody's like a Torah scholar, they don't want to have demai in the house all the time. So the Mishnah stated that Rabbi Akiva responded to this report of Rabbi Lazar's opinion by saying, I will not tell you what Rabbi Lazar really said regarding the bread of the Kuthians. And the Gemara is going to clarify Rabbi Lazar's true opinion. According to Rabbi Akiva, Rabbi Hiskia says in the name of Rabbi Acha, Rabbi Lazar permitted one to partake even of the chametz of the Kuthians immediately after Pesach. So again, Rabbi Hiskia, in the name of Rabbi Acha, is coming and giving a far more lenient opinion of what Rabbi Lazar actually is saying. Rabbi Yossi, in both cases, is giving a very, very strict opinion. And in both cases, Rabbi Hiskia is coming and giving a very, very lenient opinion. In the case of the hide, Rabbi Hiskia is saying Rabbi Lazar, really said it's permitted to smear the hide with Sheviis oil. And so, really what this is trying to say over there is that a person who smears this with a Sheviis oil does not violate the law, and he should not be penalized. He just gets this curse, but he does not get penalized. Now, over here, what's going on? Well, normally speaking, we have to wait a period of time before we can go out and get chametz, and especially from another Jew, because they have to have time to go acquire it. So if you went to a Jewish store, you need to have a little bit of time so that you could safely assume that they went and got chametz, or they made chametz. You're not allowed to have any benefit from chametz that a Jew possesses over Pesach. Okay. Now, in the case, one way to read it is that the Kuthians retained these items over Pesach, and the Tanaim are going to be forbidding any of the chametz which the Kuthians had over Pesach until it could safely be assumed that the chametz came into being after Pesach, and it was not from this what they kept during Pesach. Now, keep in mind, one way to read it, and there's no disagreement about this, that the Kuthians are coming and keeping chametz over Pesach. They have a different reading and understanding of the law, and they weren't as learned, and they were making mistakes on all sorts of things, not only on this, but also on issues about bread. There's a case in Sachim where the Kuthians would say chamotzi over rice bread. There's a lot of problems over there. And one way to read this is basically saying that Rabbi Eliezer permits this right away because they're basically saying that Rabbi Eliezer is saying they're not Jews anyway. So, you can go get chametz right away from a non-Jew because it's a non-Jew. They don't have the requirement to get rid of chametz and not benefit from chametz. So one way to read it is that, no, Rabbi Eliezer is saying that you're allowed to take the chametz of a Kuthian immediately after Pesach because they're not Jewish. And one way to understand it is that, another way to understand it is that, that the Tanaim are saying, and they disagree with Rabbi Eliezer, that the Kuthian bread is permitted, and they only are forbidding it after Pesach out of concerns that the Kuthians possessed it, or they had this yeast, and basically that they weren't doing it right. And another way to look at it, again, is going to be that, yes, you're not allowed to derive any benefit from chametz or yeast that a Jew possessed on Pesach. And because the Kuthians were holding this over Pesach, the Tanaim are going to forbid it. But Rabbi Eliezer is disagreeing with the Tanaim and saying that one, purchased chametz from the Kuthians immediately after because he's saying they're not Jews, and so the chametz is going to be permitted after Pesach because they're not Jews. This, by the way, is a dispute among the Tanaim whether they were Jews or not. Ultimately, they were declared to be non-Jews, but at this time it was still a debate. Now, the Mishnah said that if a bathhouse was heated with a straw of Sheviis, one is permitted to bathe in it, and the Gemara is going to qualify it. It's going to say, this is what you say regarding those public bathhouses, but as regard to the private bathhouses reserved for respected people, it is forbidden to bathe in them. And the Mishnah continues and says, but if he's a respected person, he should not bathe in it. The Gemara is going to illustrate it with an incident. So it says, if he was a man of stature, he should not bathe in it, as we can see from the following case. Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi went from Lod to Bet Gavrin in order to bathe. So this is talking about a case where Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi, who was living in Lod at this time, went to another city to go bathe in a bathhouse. Why? Because he was Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi, he's a very respected person. And he's saying that that the idea is that in Lod, he would not be permitted to bathe in this bathhouse because it was heated in Sheviis straw. And the Pnei Moshe is going to explain it in one of two ways. Either the bathhouse in Bet Gavrin did not have straw that had Sheviis sanctity, so there's nothing wrong with going to that bathhouse over there. Or it could be read, where in Bet Gavrin, people did not recognize Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi, so he'd be permitted to bathe in such a bathhouse there. There's two ways to read that. Now, having mentioned this incident regarding a bathhouse, the Gemara is going to talk about another incident regarding a bathhouse. Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish was in Bosra, and he saw idol worshippers pouring wine to the image of Aphrodite, who was near the bath. And he said to the local Jews, is it not forbidden to bathe there? So he's basically saying that, since the bath was used as an idol, as part of a idolatrous service and part of avodah zarah, that you're not allowed to do that, and you're not allowed to benefit from items used in the service of idols. And this, by the way, can even apply to structures connected to the ground. And so since the bath is going to be connected to the ground, effectively, this whole infrastructure is part of a service to an idol. That's going to be a problem. And the Gemara continues, it says that he went and asked Rabbi Yochanan and said to him in the name of Rabbi Shimon ben Yehotzedek, an object belonging to the public is not forbidden. In other words, that Rabbi Yochanan is saying that since the bath does not belong to the idol worshippers, but to the public at large, we're applying the principle that a person cannot render prohibited an item that is not his own. In other words, as the Vilna Goan is explaining it, he's saying that the principle similarly applies to Sheviis, and that hold on a second. So actually, it's not clear what the Vilna Goan is referring to. It just says that the Vilna Goan states that the principle applies to Sheviis, but it's not clear what law Sheviis the Vilna Goan is talking about here. But there is a different version of this incident in the Bavli of Avodah Zarah 58b, and the Mishnah does forbid a respected person from going and engaging in the bathhouse. And perhaps what the Vilna Goan is saying is he's saying that the Vilna Goan is going to allow him to bathe in water heated by the Sheviis straw, because the person is getting benefit from the water, not from the Sheviis produce. And in the case of the benefit from the air, that's going to be, and like going to a sauna, that's going to be a problem. In other words, you stay in this dry heat and it makes you sweat, and you're getting a direct benefit from the straw. And over here, you would say that perhaps it's going to be a case where, now the private bathhouse where, you're heating the water, maybe you could say it's something like this, image of Aphrodite, and what Rabbi Yochanan is saying, which is that, that the bath really belongs to the public at large. And so perhaps that's why the bathhouse would be allowed to bathe in it. But of course, a Torah scholar would not be, because he knows better. But again, these are placed next to each other, and the Rabbi Yochanan is saying that an object belonging to the public is not forbidden. And in other words, since the bath does not belong to the idol worshippers, then it's going to be allowed. Anyway, I have to go feed my son, and that concludes chapter 8. Have a great day. Okay.